Where are we? Where's she? Okay, hold on. It looks like I was trying to log in and it was taking forever, but then it looks like it logged me in with my other profile. Second, let me see if it will then let me have images, or if I'm on this profile, it might not. 2 seconds. Let me. Herbalists Without Borders is a nonprofit that I work for. I'm the executive director, so that's what Herbalists Without Borders is. Let me think, because I am on the desktop app. I was logged in as them. Let's see if I click here, I should be able to switch out. Oh, well, it looks like it let me. Have some host privileges. So let's see, this might work. We'll see. See here. Why is Zoom so slow today? Okay. Spotlight. There we go. Okay, that's weird. So it looks like I can still do I can still do things as if I'm the host, even though it logged me in as my other account. Okay. So that's fine. How is everyone? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're tuning in from. Let me hear. Wow, my Zoom is very choppy right now. Is everybody else able to see or hear me okay, or is it coming through odd? Because I keep seeing my image like freeze and kind of get pixelated. So let me know. A bit choppy. Okay. There must be something going on with our Wi-Fi. Okay, no pixelation. Awesome. So as long as my voice is coming through okay. That's weird. All right, so I want to make sure here. Let me close this. So over the weekend, I saw, what did I see? A friend of mine had something about like a post-apocalyptic world, and I started on a crazy search trying to find this painting that I had seen when I was in college, and we're talking, gosh, more than 10 more than 10 years ago. And I was just like mad trying to find the painting, and I could only remember the artist's first name. Well, part of his first name, because he has one of those like 2 names as his first name. And I have like 20 tabs open because I was literally searching through Google over and over and over again. All of Saturday, every time I had a moment, I was Googling to try to find this artist's name. And then it wasn't until last night that I kept thinking his name was Jean Paul. And I was like, Jean Paul, I feel like it's Jean Paul. And then finally I said, wait, I think it's Jean Pierre. And when I did that, sure enough, his art came up. Took me the entire weekend to try to find him. But I was searching through Google so much that I quite literally thought that I had made up the painting in my head. Because I said, did it not exist? Like, am I misremembering? But I'll show you real quick. I'm just closing out the 20 tabs that I had open here, but basically it's like a post-apocalyptic world where nature were to take over, right? So here we go. So Jean-Pierre Roy, and it's the defeat of entropy. There we go. Let me pull this up 1 second. When I tell you, I was just searching so hard for this. So he did quite a few of them in this series. He did like a post-apocalyptic type of series. But this painting specifically is the one that I fell in love with in college, and I had done a paper on it. But it's yeah, it's these buildings, and it was huge. It was huge. And I remember looking into the painting because for the paper, and writing all about, you know, how nature would reclaim the world after after we're gone. And this painting is huge. It's huge. But yeah, so that's, I think it looks awesome. But he has quite a few in this series. There's like airports and buildings, like everything after humanity has been extinguished. But quite amazing work. He's gone into a lot of surrealist work. But yeah, if you're into art, there's quite a few exhibits too. If you're here in New York City, there's a Mayan exhibit. There are the Sumerian, like it's with the women of Sumeria, I believe, or yeah, I think it's the women of Sumeria, or at the Morgan Library Museum. So if any of you are into that, into museums, check it out. It's really, really awesome. I definitely want to check some of these out. Let me see here. Oh, and I did also want to show. So I'm currently working on something. I did post it up in the Facebook group, but if you are not in there, so basically I have quite a few books that are available online. And so I started making these little bookshelves, and instead of just making a list of different books that I have with the link, I just felt like it's kind of, I wanted to make something much more interactive and fun. So I figured I could make something like this. So these are books that you can literally just find online for free. Some of them are online because the author has put are available as part of educational outreach with universities. And some of them are up because of public. I felt that sneeze coming in, sorry. But yes, so they're available through archive.org, Gutenberg Press. So these are books that have entered public domain, and so are now available for just reading like that online. And so I just know it's sometimes very difficult to find hard copies of certain books. And sometimes, like quite a few of these, I have hard copies, but then when about or traveling, I don't want to bring a bunch of books with me, and so I will get a PDF copy of the book to have on hand in case I would need to reference it. So yeah, so I have a bunch of lists of all these books that are available as PDFs or EPUBs. So I'm kind of putting this all together to share with everyone. So if this would be of interest, it'll be made available. Right now, I have this one shelf, um, and I was working on a cover here. Um, but yeah, so you'd be able to access, and it's as easy as just clicking on the book cover, and it opens it up. Um, so there are some that it's a direct link to just download the PDF onto your computer or your mobile device. All of the websites have been checked, so don't worry. Nothing that would give you a virus or anything like that. Um, so they're all vetted, real websites. And some of them, like the ones that go to Gutenberg or some that open up into archive.org, they actually give you choices on how you would like to download them. So whether it's a PDF, an EPUB, or there's other options as well. Or if you actually just want to read the text on your device. So if you don't want to download it, but you just want to read it, so that's an option as well. But yeah, so I'm hoping just to kind of make it a little bit more fun rather than just giving a list. I think having a little bookshelf uh, might just be a little bit more entertaining. So I'm going to put and yeah, so share those. There is a book I would love to show you, so I'm going to stop the share for a second. But yeah, so I'll work on maybe doing about 3 of these shelves here, and then sharing that out as a document for now, and then I'll just keep adding it. So right now on this page, there's about 18 books. And so maybe I'll add like 2 more pages worth of books. So there's like 30, 36, or like 45 books, something like that, so that folks can kind of start checking them out and digging in if they want. And then I'll just continue to build it. So hopefully can put that out in the coming days. I love making resources, and I like making more interactive resources rather than just like, here's a list. Well, let me do something different. And so I got that idea and thought that might be a little bit more fun, in terms of how I can share that material. Also, going to be working on quite a few things. I was just talking to Brian yesterday, and gonna keep working on the Houseplant book that I've been working on. So I was telling Brian, like, I need to make the time to get through the final push. So yeah, so I will keep everyone posted on that. And so 2 things I want to show you. So one is I went on this mushroom walk on Saturday morning. Well, both of us did. And they had this really nifty book, but they had the first edition available on the table. And I went to find it. I couldn't find the first edition, but I did find the second edition. And it's great. I have quite a few tree guides, but it's mostly like Northeast or North America. I do have a book, I think it's called Trees of the York, but this is just specifically for species found in New York State. And one of the great things that I really love about this guide is that it does the silhouette comparisons. So you can identify a lot of trees basically by their silhouette, their overall growth habit, their crown shape, right? And so this is an example of a 2-story building, and just how the tree would get in terms of full size in comparison to a 2-story building. So if you were looking for trees that would stay relatively small, right, versus trees that would quickly grow well past your 2-story home, because here in New York City you can request it. There we go. I'm seeing that my image is freezing. Yeah. And so let me see here. So here. Yeah, here we go. And what I love is that they actually have a full color photo, but they also have the bark, the flower, and the fruit. So it's just a nifty little guidebook. So if anyone is here in New York City, I really, really like this guide so far. And another guide that I just wanted to show you real quick is so the global flora. So this is a very tiny book, so it's not it's not an extensive book. However, there was recently a giant poster released, which has the proper designations of plant families as they currently exist. So according to the latest phylogenetic data, right, the DNA, genetic, the consensus as to how these plants are currently related has been released. And it's this huge poster. It's free to download. And it's scaled very large. So even though you download it as a PDF, you can zoom in. You can get that printed to a giant poster if you wanted to. I might do that. I'm not sure. The background is black, so it would be a lot of ink. So I'm going to see if I would actually, I would probably have to send it to a professional location to do that. But what I love is that you can purchase the accompanying book. And what it does, it actually breaks down. So this is what the poster looks like. And it is available for free download, this whole thing. But what's great is that this breaks down the poster. So it gives you, so for instance here, so here's a section of the poster, and then it starts breaking down those plant families for you. So if you are trying to get more into taxonomy, more into kind of botany and the ways that these plants are related, then this might be something of interest. So I'm pretty excited. It shows a bunch of different examples of the flowers across different plant families, so morphological differences, similarities as well. Absolutely amazing. I was having so much fun yesterday, just kind of perusing and trying to identify as many as I could. There are definitely some odd flowers I'd never seen before. And just on Saturday, I was looking at some witch hazel flowers, and so it was great to see them because I always think of them. They kind of look like little fireworks. So I saw quite a few. They bloom in the winter here in New York. So let me see. But yeah, and they even have some species that I saw in Costa Rica as well, like the Thunbergia alata, I believe. So yeah, you can actually buy the little booklet. And for the PDF of the poster, let me see here. Oh yes, Sue. Yes. I'm at the end of the list. I'm going to actually list the titles of the books. So if people prefer that, but the first part of the document will be the bookshelves. So hold on. Let me get that PDF list for everyone. The PDF poster. Let me see here. 2 seconds. Just pop that up. Wow, my connection is really bad today. I'm not sure what's going on. Where did it go? That wasn't it. Nope. There we go. So I'm going to put it for everyone in the meeting. And here is and I'll share the screen real quick, just so that you see. So this breaks down angiosperms. So angiosperms are flowering plants. So if you want to get the poster, all you have to do is click right here on the PDF, and that will open up the poster for free. It will automatically download. Hold on, I should be able to then open this one. But if you would prefer to get the booklet that comes with it as well, it does have options to buy it through Google, I think, and Amazon. But this is the poster. So absolutely gorgeous. So, and what's really nice is at the end of the booklet, it also does credit all of the photographers that got these. There were a couple like the begonia family. I feel like they picked such a little representative. It was just like a little white begonia flower, and I was like, there's much more prettier begonia flowers that could have been picked, but that's probably maybe the only one that was available. But yeah, there were some of these families. I was like, oh, there were such better representatives that could have been chosen to really showcase how gorgeous the flowers in some of these families are. And they went with the most simple, but it absolutely amazing. A lot of work went into this, so it might be something, yeah, that would be of interest if you're trying to really get into the botany, to really get into the nitty gritty of the plant science. So yeah, let me here. Oh, great. Thank you, Priscilla. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm actually thinking about making also a list for all of the guides that I currently have that I recommend. I have guides not only for trees, but also for flowers, for herbs. I have tons of herbal guides. And what else? Herbal guides, and yeah, it's mostly herbal guides, tree guides, flower guides, and I think I have like 1 or 2 seed guides. There aren't that many, unfortunately, but yeah, I might just make a huge comprehensive list of those as well, because I do get a lot of questions about that. Folks asking if I recommend any. Also the houseplant books. I do have quite a few gardening and houseplant books too. So I think I'm basically going to end up cataloging my my entire library. I think that's been a long time coming. That's something I knew I have to do. I have so many books. But yeah, I'm gonna start working on that too. To just share the books that I pretty consistently reference. Um, and yeah, that I've loved. I won't put any on the list that I don't very much like. So no worries. But yeah, so I hope that'll be helpful. Yes, yes. Priscilla, absolutely. There are herbs are incredibly vast, and they will be different, not only in terms of the species, but even just how they're used, will greatly differ, from region to region. And so that's why I love getting reference guides that, are much more inclusive, that aren't just, let's say, saying like this is how they're used in the Northeast. Sure, I have one like that, but I like the ones, that also say explain, okay, so this is how this herb is used in South America, and how it's used in, Eastern Europe, and how it's used in South Asia. um, and so, because yes, herbs have also circumvented the globe. um, there are herbs that are part of, people's, medicine cabinets, that is not native to their area. Especially like in Latin America, we use a lot of, Mediterranean herbs. Uh, and so, I grew up with my mom using a lot of things like oregano and, rosemary, romero. Um, uh, a lot of plants that are not native to Costa Rica. They, but have been introduced and, kind of become part of, not only culinarily as well, but also medicinally. So, um, it's very cool to see. So I love that. And I have those. I think my herbal reference books far outnumber all my other reference books. Um, if I said I had 30 herbal reference books that are just, reference guides, I think that's too low of a number. Um, I have quite a few. So I'll put those together. Um, but yeah, I'm here for questions. I'm sorry if my image is coming out really choppy. I keep seeing that my face freezes. I'm just hoping that the audio isn't doing that as well. It's saying I have full internet, so I'm not sure what's going on. Um, but yeah, so I hope it's not, too big of an inconvenience. Um, ooh, oh. So Priscilla says, I'm currently taking a basic class with an herbalist from Costa Rica related to, the cosmos. Would love more information. Yeah, there was a book that I purchased while in Costa Rica, The Medicinal Herbs of Costa Rica. Um, really, it's tiny. It's a tiny book, but really, really beautiful book. Um, Quite a couple plants there that I did not expect, like snake plants. There was, and Tradescantia, as well. So there were some house plants in there. I think Kalanchoe was also in there, which I did learn was medicinal when I was in El Salvador. Had no idea that Kalanchoe was medicinal. Um, but yeah, if you want to learn more about, herbs and the cosmos, or plants just in general and the cosmos, um, yeah, there is, what's it called? There's quite a few books, but Evolutionary Herbalism by Seja Popham is amazing. I actually work with Seja, and I read the book before I started working with him, so no worries. I know I'm a little biased now, but, I read his book before I worked with him. Um, and, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's an amazing book, Evolutionary Herbalism, and it also comes with a free bonus course. But he talks about how plants are related, are associated with the planets and the elements. So you do see a lot of the elemental associations when you're working with plants in herbal medicine, especially like Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine. But also with Western herbalism, we do see things like with the humors, with constitutional theory. So there is that association of how the elements kind of, the energetics work with your system and the plants themselves. And then how do you pair that with yourself? And so he kind of takes it a step further, and he really, really had studied more so of the alchemy. And so that's how I actually stumbled upon him, because I love folklore. So any plant related folklore, whether it's, plants I see every day, or plants I see every day, or have my house plants. And so ever since I was little, I've had books on like plant folklore, and I was learning more about the alchemy and how alchemy is related to plants. And then that's how I found Sage Popham's book, Evolutionary Herbalism. So, and it had just come out. So it was like very serendipitous. It was literally, it had like just dropped. So I really recommend that book if you want to explore that. I also actually just picked up a book, and it was called The Correspondence Key, something like that. I'm trying to see. Oh, there we go. I think it's called the Rulership book. Let me grab it just so I can give you the accurate title, because I think it says Rulership. Yes, it does. Here we go. So if you're interested in kind of exploring these more esoteric type of plant properties and things like that, it's called the Rulership book by Rex E. Bills. And what's really cool, it's literally just a reference book, but it has different correspondences of the different, so astrological planets. So we know that the sun and the moon are not planets, but in astrology, they work the same way. So I've been trying to learn a little bit more about this so I could just have a working knowledge of it, because it's still very new for me. But yeah, so I got this really cool book, and it says, let's say, the sun and everything that, according to research, has been associated with it. So different plants like angelica to ash trees. Yeah, and same with moon, Jupiter. So this is a pretty cool reference guide if you're just if you're kind of diving into that part of plant. Yeah. Let me see here. So got some questions. So let me take these. So Elizabeth, so I have a desert rose that looked dead, so I pulled it out of the ground and put it in water. It seems to be doing well in the water, but has a lot of soggy roots. And has a lot of soggy roots. I want to put it in the soil. Would that shock the plant? Will it do okay? Okay, couple things there. So if you're seeing soggy roots, so roots that kind of look brown, and very gelatinous, and they kind of feel weird, like gooey to the touch, that means they're actively rotting. So I would definitely remove those. And to do so, just get a pair of scissors, but make sure you disinfect them with rubbing alcohol. Make sure to disinfect them, and just cut them completely off. The ones that you're seeing are soggy and not looking very healthy. Now, if by soggy you're talking about white healthy roots that look like they're covered in hairs, and so that can sometimes make them look like they're squishy, then those are healthy. If you're seeing like a white off-white kind of roots, those are great. But if you're seeing kind of dark brown or dark colored roots, almost black, that are kind of rotting, then you want to get those off. I would say to cut those and then take the plant out, and let that sit for just a couple hours, so that it dries, and then you can try to put it in soil. Whenever you do transfer plants from water propagations to soil, there's always a little bit of a period where the plant is kind of in shock. I would say it's better if you don't have only thin little water roots. If you see some thick, healthy roots that have hairs all over them, that really tells you those are the roots that are going to work in the soil. Though if you only currently have little fine roots that look really super thin, like little kind of like very stringy, those might not be ready for soil yet, because they won't uptake water in the soil effectively. So when you actually transfer them into soil, they dry up very, very quickly, and then you have nothing to take up water. So make sure that you do actually have some thick soil roots in there that are currently healthy, and then that should be ready. So if you only right now have those soggy roots and maybe some stringy roots, you might need a little bit more time. So definitely remove those rotten roots, and I would say still let it sit out of the water for a couple hours at the very least, just so that the wound can dry a little bit. Because if you cut it and then dunk it right back in the water, it really depends on if you keep the water very clean and you're able to do a quick water change, it definitely lessens the possibility that the wound would get infected by some type of pathogen that might be in the water, because bacteria can be in the water. If anyone has any plants in water, so in like jars or cups or anything like that, just make sure there's no soil in there. That's completely devoid of soil, very, very clean, because if you do leave soil in there, even like little floating pieces, that's surface area for fungus and bacteria to live, and so then that will just kind of for sure. Oh,
What's that?
oh, hello. Oh, hold on. Oh, I don't know. There was just some audio that came in for a second. But yes, and then if you do have oh, I forgot where I was, sorry. But yes, you can definitely do that. If the what was I saying? Oh, I was talking about soil being in the dirt, in the water, and it can cause an infection in your plant. So I would let it dry a little bit before.
Yeah. So that can happen. Let me see here. Judy, we recently got a Chinese money plant and it's dropping leaves. I'm wondering why I don't see any bugs. Okay, great question. Yes, so with the Chinese money plant, so are you referring to the money tree? Or are you referring to, which is a Pishira aquatica? So it has like a woody trunk with these leaves that kind of come out like fingers, like or are you referring to Pilea peperomoides, which are these kind of like little perfectly circular leaves? Both of those plants do appreciate a little bit of sun, but I think the Pilea, which has the circular coin kind of shaped leaves, those prefer a little bit more light than the money tree. If it's just randomly dropping its leaves, a couple things could be happening. One, it could just be shock during acclimation. So when you get a plant and you bring it home, it is going through a period of adjustment. And so this can sometimes cause some plants it's just too much stress, and they will just drop some of those leaves, and then they will put out new ones. So then the plant doesn't look very nice, but then it will start to look very nice once the new leaves pop in. So that could be one thing. Two is if there was a very quick change of temperature, it could be maybe the house was a little cooler. I would check definitely the roots. Sometimes plants that are at plant shops tend to get overwatered. If you buy them from like the big box stores, they kind of hose them down. So a lot of plants end up kind of coming to you already with root rot, which is really unfortunate. Usually in plant shops, they're a little bit more careful because it's like less, right? But if you did buy it from like a Home Depot or Lowe's, there is a tendency for them to already have root rot, and that could cause leaf drop. Now, if you don't see any bugs, that doesn't necessarily mean there aren't any. But usually if there are bugs and there's leaf drop, the leaves are turning yellow. They're starting to kind of look affected before they drop. So if the leaves are green when they're dropping, I'm leaning more towards acclimation, towards kind of just general shock of being changed from one place to another. We had a little like ginseng tea tree type of it was like a little bonsai that we had gotten a couple years back, that we brought it in and it just dropped all of its leaves. It was completely naked, and then it started just putting out new leaves. And that has happened with who else did that happen with? That happened with my it's like an umbrella fig. It's like a Ficus umbelliferae, something like that. It did that too. And even now, we were away and it had 2 leaves and it dropped them while we were away. So I'm like, great. So we're starting over again. But yeah, it can happen when there's just changes like that. So you have to, sometimes if the consistency changes, yeah, they're very quick to drop their leaves like that. Oh, no worries, Gabby, no worries. Oh, second one, Pelia. Okay, great. So if it's just dropping like that and no yellowing, then I would lean towards it's just a change of space. So if you're seeing yellowing, that's more likely a pest or root rot. But if it's green and it's just dropping, even though it's green, then I'm leaning more towards just acclimation. It was a kind of a shock switching from one place to another. Yeah, so it could just be that. Barbara, what to do, if anything, for a Christmas cactus after flowering? Also, my split leaf philodendron's new growth of leaves has taken itself out of the pot and is attached by air root. Should I cut it before putting it into a pot? All right. So with your Christmas cactus, you definitely don't need to. Let me add a spotlight here. Yeah, you definitely don't do
Show
anything.
you this baby. It's a little yellow. It did great. I had 3 pots. It's only 1 now. I'd like to save it. But yeah, it's a little yellow. Otherwise, it's fine at the moment. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, they will start to bloom during this time, during that Christmas time, Thanksgiving and Christmas. The only things to do when they are actively flowering is to do nothing. So basically don't change anything. So a lot of folks go, oh, it's so pretty, it's flowering, I'm gonna move it to the window, or I'm gonna
No,
move
we
it,
had already moved it out of the window when the flowers came. But yes,
yeah,
right.
so exactly, so it's just better to they prefer, if they're flowering, just leave them where they are, don't change anything. Because if they do get too much sun, they will start dropping their flowers much more quickly, or they'll start dropping their buds, so the flower won't even bloom. They'll just drop the bud. change how much water you're giving them as well during that time. They'll just drop flowers. Also, if you raise the temperature, so you want to keep it relatively cool, like 68, a little under 70, but over 65, you want to kind of keep it in that little, that cooler temperature, and it'll be fine. If you raise the temperature, they drop the flowers. So it's, the best thing to do is if it's happy and flowering is just step back and let it do its thing. In regards to the Monstera though, yeah, so if it's starting to come out of the pot and you would prefer to kind of remove that section. So
Right,
let's
the
see
big piece,
here.
the big piece looks great and probably needs to be hacked at some point for, put it in 2 pots, but this thing on the side, I understood to the point that it probably would be vining, looking for a place to climb up, but it's just hanging. It's the planted, the new growth, the little leaves
Mhm.
is a great bloom, but it's not, the stem like took itself out of the pot. And I see that there's one, it's an air root that's holding the whole thing. So I guess, please, what to do?
Yeah. So if you want to, some folks like want that kind of growth, but if you prefer, since if it's looking a little scraggly and kind of, you're more afraid that it's going to end up snapping because of the way that it's growing, you can definitely cut, if you want. Let me see, towards, I would say
Yeah.
maybe right. Yeah, maybe like right. Yeah, probably cut it there at the base, because it looks like there's a couple nodes right there even that you'd be able to cut and remove and just kind of put right in a new pot. You can put it in the same pot in a different angle if you wanted to. But yeah, you could definitely do that, or you can put it in water as well. They tend to do really well in water.
That's great. I thank you, Jocelyn. I
Yeah.
also, right, I have a big piece that was in water for a while, but it was doing great. It didn't bother anybody. It was just, if I leave it alone, it does good. Now it just seems to be quitting over the winter maybe, but we'll see about that. But this is right, other pandemic things. That's my baby garlic. That's having a great time over here. Once I took it out of the sunny window, it seemed to need a more indirect spot, but we're eating these, we're cutting off the tops and just eating them in the skillet as chives, which if anyone is interested in those things, it's delicious. These unintentional homegrown garlic chives, and delicious in your pot. I hacked my coleus and trying to bring it back for the spring. My wandering Jew that died 50 times. These are about 5 pieces that we're trying again. It would be a hanging basket if it wants to someday. And this is my also, all right, sweet potato that needs a bucket, but I didn't do it yet. But it
Oh,
will
look at
be,
those roots.
yes, it's going to be in a bucket soon. And this is right. This is a baby. This is pandemic stuff. This is just a baby. Oh, I'm not in the right spot with the camera. I have a crazy rooted piece of Dieffenbachia, which I took out of, it coexists nicely with the big philodendron. So there's a baby that sprung roots. And if any friend wants it, they could have it. But if not, I think it's doing okay as a coexisting plant.
Yeah.
If anyone is interested in doing that, it seems to be working out great. But thank you so much. This is
You're welcome.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, no, they're definitely propagating plants, propagating even just plants at home. Brian was just using some he was cutting some chives, and he was like that they were just sprouting roots at the base, and he's like, I'm gonna plant these up. And it starts that way, everyone. So you'll start growing your own carrots. If you start to see your we had put it was last summer, no, I think it was 2 summers ago, I had bought a bag of fingerling potatoes, and I completely forgot them under my sink. And there was like 6 or 7 potatoes that were left in that bag. And when I opened it up, sure enough, they were starting to get little shoots. And I was just like, oh man, I felt pretty bad that I wasted these good potatoes, but also I felt really bad tossing them. So I went out front. We have some little pots out front. Oh, there we go.
A coincidence. Those are exactly right. They were sprouting on their own, which I only made half the bag. And then I said, okay, let's see if they want to. It's too much fun. Just too much fun.
It's too much fun. I put them out front and the vines were crazy. They were just growing like crazy. And it was great. It was great. They were just these little potatoes. So definitely, folks, if when it's harder in the winter to purchase plants and stuff, you know, because you don't want to bring them out in the cold, sometimes work with what you got. Work with some vegetables to experiment with and pass the time, because they're definitely a lot of fun. And then you get more, and then you get more. So it's a win-win. Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Oh, and Roz is asking, with water-rooted plants, what soil do you use to pot them up? Great question. So it really depends on the plant, right? So on the species. So if you're, again, as I mentioned earlier, when you are transferring a water-rooted plant into some type of substrate, whichever it is, you want to make sure that the roots are ready for that change. So if you're just getting these really thin, stringy type of roots, it's not ready yet, because all of those are going to die the minute you put them into substrate. So you want to make sure that they have a couple of actual soil roots. And so these are going to be thicker. They're going to have like kind of white hairs all around. It's just, they're going to be just a little bit bigger and like stockier. Those are going to be the roots that are going to be able to take up water from your soil. So once you have that step, great, you're good. Now, what kind of substrate? So I would do your research as to what species you might have. If it's something like
I have spider plants, ivy, and jade.
Oh, okay. So with the ivy, they prefer a little bit more like soil in their mix. They prefer something that's gonna lock in moisture for a little bit longer. So something like a basic potting soil with some perlite works really well, even a little bit of worm castings as well. So something that might have a little bit of peat already in it. They tend to like that type of soil where it does have some drainage with the perlite, but it's more brown, basically. There's a lot more dirt in there, and they tend to do really well like that. However, with jade and spider plants, so spider plants prefer a little bit more drainage. They still like a nice amount of soil, but you might want to add something like a little bit more perlite, maybe some like orchid bark, cocoa coir. So something to kind of give it a little bit more aeration. But they do like something that will hold on to water just a little bit, but not keep them kind of swampy. So they don't want like something that's going to turn into mud when you water it. So they prefer something like that. But then jade plants want something that is going to be a lot of drainage. So very gritty type of soil. So for my jades, I do a mix of like a succulent soil mix with something like leca, or which are those little clay balls. You can also use lava rock instead. An even cheaper option is poultry grit. So you usually buy a really big bag, like a 10-pound bag for $5 of poultry grit. And that's great. It's like crushed granite, it's crushed. I think it's crushed granite, but it's poultry grit, and it's just these little rocks basically, and you mix them up with your soil. A little bit of I put a little bit of orchid bark with some of my succulents, like my crassulas, which jade is in that family. Yeah, so it's just a little bit more well draining because they don't like to sit in wet soil. So they want the water to kind of go through the soil, give it a little bit of moisture, and then dry out relatively quickly. So they don't want that kind of locked in moisture, because that's going to cause your jade to start rotting at the base, to lose its roots and things like that. So then that's why it gets a little difficult when trying to repot your plants, because you just have to look what species is this, and what is it going to prefer? Is it going to prefer well draining soil? Does it want a more kind of spongy peat like type of mix that doesn't dry out very quickly? Another thing to keep in mind is the type of pot. So if you're using something like, for instance here, like these black nursery pots, so it's plastic, so they don't dry out as quickly as the like a terracotta one would, right? So the terracotta is clay, has a lot of little pores all around the container, the little pot. So it allows for a lot of oxygen exchange, and it also pulls the moisture away from the soil. So this is great for plants that don't like wet feet, which means they don't like their roots to be wet all the time. So something that's going to dry pretty quickly. And then the plastic is going to hold that moisture a little bit more for plants that want that extra moisture, but also for younger plants as well. So younger plants would prefer like these nursery pots because they're still young, establishing themselves. They need that little bit extra of moisture. But when they're bigger, certain plants might prefer terracotta, but something like the ivy, I wouldn't recommend putting it in terracotta. It would probably do much better in plastic. The jade would do well in terracotta. Yeah, the jade would do well in terracotta. You would probably end up having to water your jade about every 2 weeks or so. That's pretty much how often I water mine. For the spider plant, if it was really big, I would say it might be okay in a terracotta. But if it's still pretty small, I would say a plastic nursery pot is probably going to be a little bit better. I have some spider plants that I grow just in water. So they tend to want a little bit of extra moisture than, let's say, that jade plant, right? Ivies can dry out pretty quickly. They're very hardy when they're outside. They can handle the cold, and they can handle really intense sun. But if they're allowed to get way too dry, they crisp up real quick. So making sure that they're getting an adequate amount of water for ivies is the most important thing. But yeah, and ivy usually you can keep it in water. Even they do really well in water. Jade, I don't think it would do very well in water long term. I have started some jades like that in water, but then I do transfer them into the pot. And what I do is I just put them into the pot with the mother plant, because she already has the right type of soil for them. So I just it's just easier that way. So what I do is I'll pot them in there. I kind of let them get pretty nice size, and then if I want, I can then pot them up into something smaller, but they're already established, right? So they're already putting out new leaves. So when the new cutting and you have planted it starts to put out new leaves, that means that its roots are becoming established, because it's gonna. So if you put a cutting into your soil mix, and then it's just not putting out any growth for a while, but it's alive, it's a good thing. It just means it's still working on its roots. So it's always roots before shoots. So always remember this. So if the roots need to reestablish themselves, if let's say you had an incident with root rot or you transferred the plant, it's always going to spend much more of its energy under the surface. And then once that's good enough, that's when the plant will start to shift energy upwards and start to put out new leaves and start to grow taller and put kind of energy into like that growth. Before then, yeah, it'll focus strictly on those roots. So when I have my little jades and I start to see that new leaves are coming in, I'll repot them, and sometimes I gift them, sometimes I put them into smaller pots and I put them amongst my other little succulents. But yeah, the jades are really, really easy to do
So
that.
the spider and ivy that are, if I continue to grow them in water, I should fertilize weekly.
No, I wouldn't say weekly. Definitely not that. That would be it depends on what type of fertilizer you're using. So I would only recommend fertilizing during active growing season. If inside your home is mimicking the growing season, you don't want to fertilize more than once a month.
Mhm.
So if you're using a current fertilizer that's working great, then stick to that. If you're trying to find one that might work really well, Super Thrive is really great.
Super Thrive.
Yeah, and that's like 1 drop per gallon. So it's
Oh,
very diluted, very long lasting because you buy a bottle for like $9. And that lasts a really long time, but it's very diluted. And so it's gonna run less of a risk that it will burn your roots. Because that's the fear with certain types of fertilizers, is they might burn your roots. I like using fish water with all my, mostly with all my plants and also with my water propagations. So I just use fish water. So we have
fish water? Oh, you have an aquarium.
yes, we have
Oh.
4. Yeah, so we have 3 tanks with each of the 3 has 1 male Japanese fighting fish. And then we have 3 tanks like that, and then 1 tank that my husband has with his 2 koi. So he has some
Oh,
koi fish.
yeah.
So we have lots of water. So that's 5, 5, 5. So those are 15 gallons, and then his tank is like 25 or something. So yeah, so we get a lot of fish water. And so that's what I like to use primarily to water all my plants, because that fish water is very healthy, but it's also very diluted. So I don't have to worry about anything getting burned by like a commercial fertilizer. I've had run-ins previously in previous years when I was experimenting with commercial fertilizers, that I learned that if it says to dilute it 4 times, let's say, dilute it 6 times, dilute it more than it suggests. Because sometimes it's still way too strong. And also depends on the plant. Some plants are just a little bit more sensitive. And also everyone, please note, different plants sometimes require different types of fertilizer. So it's worth checking just in case. So for instance, African violets, they have been around in the horticultural trade for so long. There is a specific fertilizer just for African violets. So that just makes your life really easy, because you can just buy that, so you know it works and you know it's made for your African violet. With orchids, also, there's orchid fertilizers very specifically. Orchid fertilizer is really great too for succulents. I've used orchid fertilizer for some of my succulents. They really like it. Also, my Hoyas really like orchid fertilizer during the growing months. For plants like bromeliads, like air plants, they don't use regular fertilizer. They have a special fertilizer that you spray into your water when you dunk them in, because they take their fertilizer in through the leaves. So it's a totally different type of fertilizer. there's yeah, so like bromeliads take it through their leaves, orchids, Hoyas do as well. So just sometimes you got to check what kind of fertilizer my plant might like, because there are some that can't take up certain types of nitrogen based fertilizer, for instance, that have a high urea content. For instance, that might not work very well. There are some that want fertilizers that are very water based, that will kind of that are gentle enough like that. So yeah, fertilizers, it's a very tricky thing. Slow release fertilizers are great. They're like these little granules, but you can accidentally be very heavy handed. So I've learned that the hard way. So it's better to literally take a pinch and just do that, and don't use a scoop, because it'll be too much. It'll be too much. I learned that the hard way, and you don't even know that there's a problem until it's about 2-3 months down the line, because it's slow release. So it's only activated every time you pour water, basically. So it slowly starts to release fertilizer. But if you have so much, what ends up happening is you end up just burning all your roots. And I didn't know this. I thought like, oh, if it's slow release, it's fine. It's only going to trickle a little bit. And I would put scoops in my mixes, and then my poor plants would die. So I learned just a little sprinkle is more than enough. But yeah, fertilizing can be rather a precarious type of thing. So definitely like for the ivy and for the spider plant, they would definitely appreciate more being fertilized much more often than, let's say, the jade. So a lot of succulents, they do not like to get fertilized. Or if you fertilize them, they prefer something very gentle, like worm castings, for instance. So a lot of succulents are coming from areas that are very nutrient deficient. So they're not made to take in large amounts of nitrogen, for instance, and it would actually damage the plant. So less is more for your succulents. I hope that helps. Let me see. And Irene is asking, in houseplants, how often do they need to be fertilized, like orchids, Hoyas, peace lilies, holiday cactus, violets, etc. So it's usually when you want to, so again, with succulent type plants, they would prefer less often. With other plants, I would really say it's more so during the active growing season. So this is like maybe during your late spring, summer months, when you're seeing that the plant is actively growing. Now, there are some plants that don't grow during the warmer months, that like to grow during the colder months. So for instance, I have a granovia, which is hold on, let me grab my granovia here. So this is a granovia. And they look like little roses. So these guys, during the summer months, they close completely. And it just looks like a rosebud. It's a succulent. And they come from the Canary Islands. And during the summer months, this thing is asleep. It's dormant. It's closed. I still water it, but it is just not doing anything. And then late October, early November is when it wakes up. And this actually starts growing during the winter. So it depends on the species. So for now, this is his growing season. And as soon as it starts to warm up, probably like late March, early April, this will close again and will be asleep again until the late fall. So it depends on the plant, but I just wanted to show you an exception because they don't always adhere to warm months of growing season. But that's when you want to fertilize your plants, is during that growing season. They're expending a lot of that energy, growing and pushing out leaves and growth. So that's when you want to give them a little bit of extra help. If your plant, if it's like in the middle of winter or your plant is dormant, you don't want to fertilize it. Now, if you're using year-round fertilizing techniques, like things like fish water, things like that, where that is gentle enough that you can use all around the year. So it's not so heavy of a dose that it's bad to use every time you water. So I use that every time I water. Fish water, no problem. But if you're using these much more concentrated types of fertilizers, then yes, I would say to kind of stick to the growing season. And you don't want to fertilize your plants more than once a month, even when it's during the growing season. So if typically depends on where you are in the world, of course, but typically growing seasons tend to be about like a 3-month period, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere. And so that means you might end up only fertilizing your plant 3 to 4 times a year. So you don't want to fertilize it more than once a month if you're using some type of like commercial fertilizer. So these are like powders or these liquids that you kind of dilute in water. You want to stick to like once a month, just to give your plants some time, because an issue also with fertilizers, why they're causing that burning, is a lot of them are very salt based. So what ends up happening is that they actually wick water away from your roots, and this can cause them to burn, to dehydrate. So if you are also fertilizing your plants, always remember that you do not want to add fertilizer to a plant that's super dry. So if you've like let your plant dry out, maybe you went away for 2 weeks and you didn't realize the heat was going to be on, or it was incredibly hot when you were away, and you get to your plant, you come home and it looks like it's crispy, it's dry, that's not the time to fertilize. So do not add fertilizer to that plant, because that will just pull more water away from the roots. You want to slowly start to hydrate that plant back up, see if you can bring it back before. If you know you're going to fertilize a bunch of your plants as well, and you're using those commercial fertilizers, give your plants a little bit of a water the day, if they're really dry, a little bit of water the day before, just so that they have imbibed a little bit of water, and they're not super dry when the fertilizer comes into contact with them. That has been a problem. So do not fertilize a plant that's like bone dry. It's just not going to end well. I've seen folks like, oh no, I forgot about it and it's crispy, and they think I'm going to add fertilizer and that's going to save the plant. And usually that kind of signs the death certificate. So I wouldn't recommend that. Yeah. Do ferns, Elizabeth is asking, do ferns need to be fertilized? Not necessarily. A lot of ferns, when their own fronds die back, they kind of die back to the base. It kind of usually tends to stay in the pot and actually ends up feeding the fern. But you can, I would just say it would have to be something that's very, very, very diluted. Very, very kind of just something that's not gonna burn them very, very quickly. And Brenda's asking, I have a variegated spider plant that was exposed to freezing temperatures. The ends of the leaves, of course, turn black from the cold temperature, but the plant is recuperating well after the transfer. Can I cut off all the black parts of the plant? You can. I would recommend, though, don't cut back to the green tissue. So cut back. So let's say, so you have here, let's say this is where the green starts, and this, you have all this whole section of black. Just cut like right before the black ends, because if you cut all the way up to the healthy tissue, you're re-injuring the plant, and that black part is already kind of cauterized, right? It's almost like it's already scabbed over. So if you kind of cut past the black to the green, then what ends up happening is you reopen the cut. So just cut up right up to where that edge of that black, so that you still have kind of like that scab covering. You don't want to reopen that, because then you might lose more of the leaf. So yes, you can do that. But just, yeah, don't cut into the green tissue. Brenda, a local plant shop offered a kokedama class. I have an arrowhead philodendron in the ball. I'm afraid that this is not a good choice for the plant long term. What are your thoughts? Great question. So it depends. So for those of you who don't know what kokedama is, so basically, you make a ball of like moss, and sometimes there's substrate inside. Sometimes it's just straight moss, but basically it's like a ball. So you put your plant in it, you kind of create this little capsule basically for the roots, and then it's hung. Sometimes they're put into like these little hanging sculpture like things. Sometimes it's just tied with twine and hangs just like that. So it's kind of like an aerial pot. Now, in terms of long term, it depends on the species. So for a philodendron or like a syngonium, it would be fine for a while. It will definitely outgrow it eventually, but it will be okay for a little while. Certain plants I've seen people put in kokedamas, which I don't think are a very good idea, are like palms or succulents. I don't recommend putting those. But certain things like staghorn ferns, when they're mounted on wood or cork, or I've seen some put in these like the kokedamas. It's okay. It's okay. So it will be good for a while. And because philodendrons and like syngoniums, a lot of epiphytic aroids, or semi-epiphytic, they do like having a lot of air exchange. So as long as it's not being kept moist and letting kind of dry out in between, kind of resaturating it with water, they're pretty happy. And they do like to be a little root bound for a while. So if it's a relatively small piece and you had like a couple roots, it could take a very long time for it to actually outgrow that. So if you're starting to feel, if you are touching it and maybe you see that it's like really root bound, or the roots are starting to escape and actually like piercing through, that might mean, yes, it's time for an upgrade. But yeah, if you put like a small piece of like a philodendron or like a syngonium, and you put it into one of those things and it has relatively small roots, you could probably keep that in there for more than a year before it would really kind of outgrow it. But yeah, it's an okay idea for those type of plants, because they do, but it depends on what you're putting in it as well. So if it's just sphagnum, that can be okay as long as you're letting it kind of dry out in between. If they're filling it with really soft moss or like peat or something like that, then that's not so good, because that's going to hold way too much moisture for really long periods of time. But if it's like a mostly like sphagnum moss, or if they put like cocoa chips or orchid bark and like a mix, like a very well draining mix inside of that like ball, then that works really well too. So it really depends on the materials you're choosing and the plant you're choosing, but it should be okay if you're at least letting it dry. I would definitely recommend that. Sue is asking, can you put a Christmas poinsettia in a pot into the ground? Yes, absolutely. If you are in a kind of semi-tropical place. So if you're here, like in somewhere like in New York, where you get a hard winter, definitely not. But if you live even like somewhere like Florida or they're native to Mexico, and in like you see them growing like trees in Central America and South America as well. So you can definitely put them outside, but they will grow very quickly. So do be aware of that. They will grow very quickly. They grow very tall, but they do need kind of like a sunny, tropical, very nice, humid kind of environment. If your area gets super cold, if it snows, then I wouldn't recommend putting it into the ground. Yeah, because then it'll just die when it gets exposed to the cold. Roz is asking, how do you know when to repot anything? That's a great question. So really, also again, a game of depends, right? Yeah, it depends on a couple things. So if your plant, let's say, is actively like rotting, the roots are dying off, that it's an emergency, you need to change that soil, get it into a new pot, new substrate, to try to save the plant. But if it's just a regular plant that you purchased and you just like, well, how do I know when it's ready? Check the roots. So certain plants might like to be a little root bound, and they're perfectly comfortable with being root bound, which means that the roots are starting to circle the pot, and they kind of fill the pot, and they like that. Some plants do. Some plants not so much. So you can look up what kind of plant you have, or get it identified. I'm always happy to identify plants if people are unsure what they have. And so certain plants like to be root bound, some don't. Now, let's say your plant is root bound. So a couple things. One, you might see roots escaping the base. If you have drainage holes, they'll start escaping. And it's not if there's like one or two, but if there's a couple really escaping your pot, that might be it's time. If your pot cracks as well, if you have a plastic pot and it cracks, that means the roots are getting way too big. They need out. Also, if you see there's no more soil in your pot and you're seeing roots, that's another sign that your plant is severely root bound. So yeah, because there's some species of plants that, like peperomia, for instance, and some types of succulents too, where their root growth is so shallow and grows so slowly that you don't have to repot them for years. There's others like philodendrons where you might find yourself, depending on how fast it's growing, you might find yourself repotting maybe once a year, maybe once every 2 years. It really depends on the plant itself, but most of the time succulents, cacti, they don't need to really be repotted. They can be in their pot happy for years at a time. But sometimes some of the more like foliage plants, they might need to be repotted a little bit more frequently. But unless you're trying to like grow tiny plants, right, like from little pots, and then that you will see kind of they need upgrades more often. But once you have a nice mature plant, yeah, you're probably not going to be repotting that fairly often, unless you're like giving them like a greenhouse, and you have like the right lighting and the right everything, and that they keep their exploding, then yeah, you might have to do them more often. But when they're like regular house plants, yeah, it's not that often. So it's a myth that you need to repot all of your plants in your home every spring. So don't do that. I've had folks ask me that or tell me that. I like to save all my repotting for the spring, but you do not have to repot them every spring. You don't need to do that. Synth, I want to break off from my overgrown panda plant. What should I plant it in, and do I need to harden it off and then plant it? Yes. So if you do cut a section of that panda plant, definitely put it aside and let it just callus. So kind of creates that scab. Should be good after 24 hours. and then you can plant it up. I would say, well, panna plants, they like much more like drainy kind of soil, but if you're starting it off with as a propagation, it is going to need a little bit more moisture in the first couple weeks. So don't keep it wet, but just kind of stay on top of it, that as soon as it starts to feel like it's getting dry, give it a little bit of a water. And you don't want to give it a full bottom water because it has no roots at this point. So you don't want it to just rot. So we're talking like take a little bit of water, just enough to kind of saturate like the first inch or so of your soil, just so that it has just enough moisture to start putting out roots. So if anyone here, if you're putting a cutting with no roots at all into a pot, do not fill the whole pot up with water. If you have like a bottom water, the whole thing, because it has no roots, so it can't use that water. So what ends up happening is just a stick sitting in the mud, and it'll start to rot. So you want to just kind of wet a little bit the surface so that it's just getting moisture, but it's not a lot. It dries relatively quickly. But yeah, you can do that. Royd is asking, is it true that the only plant that will survive in the dark are peace lilies, as I have no window in my bathroom? It does get humid when I shower. So no, plants won't typically survive in the dark. The thing with peace lilies and certain like Dracaena and pothos is that they do respond pretty well to fluorescent lights and to certain incandescent lights. So basically your house lights. So that's why they tend to be used as office plants for places that have no windows, because they tend to do really well with fluorescent lighting. And in terms of very well, I should say they just kind of survive. They might not necessarily thrive, but they're just getting enough light to survive. If you don't have a light that would potentially help your plant grow, I would suggest to do so, because they won't grow in the dark. So plants need light. Well, I mean, of course, there's parasitic plants and all of that jazz, but when we're talking things like peace lily, they do need some form of light in order to produce food to survive. So it might be doing well because of your bathroom light. But if you were not to turn on your light, it would definitely die. So I would just make sure that it's getting a nice amount of light. They do appreciate the humidity. Certain plants like a Dracaena, for instance, like a snake plant. There's been experiments where people will put them like in a closet for weeks and they'll be fine, but that's because it's a succulent. It's more of like a succulent type of Dracaena, and it's stored all of that energy. So that's the only reason it's alive. It will eventually die, even if you're watering it, because it can't make any more food. So once it goes through its reserves, that's it. Same thing with your peace lily. It probably has a nice amount of reserves, and so that's helping it survive. What you can do for folks that do have plants in dark places, sometimes it helps to do a couple things. Either have two of the same plant. So with one, you have it by a window. Peace lilies don't really like to be moved though, so this might not work with a peace lily. But for instance, like with a snake plant, if you have one in your bathroom, one by a window, and then every couple days you switch them, and so that it's still kind of replenishing that battery, right? That internal battery, those sugars that it very much needs. I've seen folks do that. Or take the plant itself and maybe bring it out during the day to get some sunlight, 3 to 4 hours at the very least, and then putting it back in the room that has no windows. That's an option. But there are certain plants that don't like to be moved. So peace lily is one. It does not like to be moved. And another one is like certain types of figs as well. They do not like to be moved. They don't like change. But with peace lilies, I mean, especially if it's in a dark room, you will eventually either need to supplement light or leave your lights on at least a couple hours a day for it to continue to survive. Yeah. And Irene says, I use rainwater to water my houseplants. Is that better than tap water? Yes, and you do want with rainwater, it can be great, but depending where you live, you might have acid rain, which is very common in polluted areas like in cities. And so that can tend to not be very great for your plants long term. Sometimes there are some benefits to tap water in that they do have some mineralization in there. So things like some base minerals. Depends on if you have really soft water or hard water. That's about the mineral content. But sometimes the plants will appreciate some of that mineralization. That's why you don't necessarily want to water plants with only distilled water, unless there are some species like carnivorous plants, for instance. But otherwise, I mean, rainwater is pretty good. Yeah, and if you're fertilizing, that could be giving them other things that they might need also from their water. So it should be fine. Joyce, I love my jade. It's under lights, but it's getting leggy even with the light very close. Great. Great example with jades. So with the lights, a couple things could be happening. Either one, the lights are very strong, and so sometimes this promotes a lot of growth, and so the plant's just growing relatively quickly. And so what ends up happening is it kind of looks kind of crazy. If it's getting very leggy and the internodal spaces, so the spaces between the leaves are really wide, it could mean that your grow light isn't very strong. So it's not strong enough, and so therefore the jade is trying to pull itself.
Can I show you the plant?
Yeah, here we go. Ooh.
It used to be on a windowsill, so I had to keep cutting around short so it fit on the windowsill. But it's like, yeah, it's like getting very, and I've cut it back all the time so it doesn't get, I was trying to fill it out. Oh, you even seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do see it's getting a lot of growth. The internodal spaces are a little wide, but not that wide. So I
Okay.
think it's just pushing out all that growth because it has so much light. So it's just putting out more and more leaves.
Oh, good.
I
worry about my plant. I've had it for so long.
It looks amazing. That trunk, it's super huge.
I had it on the windowsill forever, like for the last 12 years. And then the last couple of years, the sun has gotten too hot. So he was, they would kind of freeze in the winter and boil. But so now I'm hoping just to leave it on this counter on my right here forever.
No, it looks great.
And then where am I? I got bugaboos. I can't tell where I am.
No, you're fine.
Okay. Oh, where's the little hole? I don't know. There. So I got bugs of some kind. They're eating my plant.
Oh, okay.
And
that might be a caterpillar. You might have a caterpillar somewhere in your soil.
Because I have the same plant right here in water, and it never gets chewed on.
Yeah, you might have a caterpillar or some type of, because if you're getting like those little nibbles along the edges or holes like that, it tends to be made by a caterpillar. And caterpillars, they tend to burrow into the soil of some houseplants, and then they come out usually at night.
Okay, because I've been digging through, the other day I was just digging through trying to find, I don't see anything. And it's also, you can see it a little, I cut them all off, but this little guy here, which I have no idea what it is. There it is. I have no idea what that is.
That looks like that's a peperomia obtusifolia.
This thing can freeze, the leaves can freeze, and it comes back to life. Like they're
great.
And then this guy, this came from a huge plant that I had. And that's all I got left. And but I don't know, like, what is that? Like there, do you see that? Coordinated. Yeah, so I got, but I don't think it's happy in there.
Yeah.
And,
That looks like this like snake plant, right?
yes. It
Yeah.
was huge, like it was like, just humongous. And then, yeah, and this is all I got left of the poor thing. Breaks my heart. And I have this big peace lily.
Wow.
And this thing, if it gets a tiny bit of sun on it,
It burns.
the leaves just go, wow.
Yep.
It's like, I've got this thing about like 4 feet from the window, and it just gets a little bit of sun. It got a little bit of sun one day, then closed curtain, and and did all this. It's like, geez.
Yep.
So,
they do not like change.
but yeah, they just don't like the sun. So,
No.
and they don't like air conditioners either.
No. Yeah. AC.
I'm trying to find a forever spot for them. So I get like where I don't know if you can see, but like so if I pulled them back, it would still get some snow. Yeah, it's like I'd have to put them like way back. Oh, I could do that, eh?
Yeah, you can.
Because it's a long room, like I had them in one point, but then like the sun's changing position, right? And it still manages to get it, and it's like 8 feet away.
Yeah,
So-
no, it should still do well. Like even if you were to move it to the opposite side of the couch, if you wanted to pull it like farther away or anything like that, it should be
I had
okay.
it. I had it like about 8 feet away, and back to the wall, and still. So I'm thinking I got a long apartment. I just got the front windows. So I'm thinking maybe I should just move it. Where are we? So I just move it to the other side of the room.
You
And then I
could.
can have a forever home there.
Exactly. And you can absolutely, especially if it's in the way, if it's like right by the AC unit or right by a heater or anything like that. Yeah, kind of finding a forever home where it's the temperature is not going to change too drastically. Then
it was like in a corner on just over for like 10 years, 12 years. And then all of a sudden the sun was burning it. And it was like,
oh.
So
yeah, if you pull it back, then you wouldn't have to worry about that, because even if you have the curtain open, since it's so much farther back, you'll be good.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Actually, I've had that plant for like 16 years. And,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
been in perlite and water like that whole time.
That's great.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm going to go catch a bus.
Good luck.
Thank you.
And let me
Whoops.
grab a couple more questions. I see. Here we go. T. Bailey, help. Is there any way of bringing back a peace lily that appears to have root rot? I had a beautiful mother plant that grew pretty large and quickly, so I propagated it into 2 smaller pots. One of the smaller pots' leaves became very limp. Yes. So if you do have that active root rot, you will have to cut off those rotting roots. So you would have to basically take it out, clean it really well, get all the soil off so you can really inspect it, and use decontaminated scissors. So spray your scissors with rubbing alcohol, make sure they're nice and sharp, and cut away all of that dead, kind of all those dead roots. And then you would probably have to put it into water to kind of bring it back. I wouldn't recommend putting it back into the soil, because that soil already has like any bacteria or fungus that was participating in the rot. So basically, once they'll be a kind of part of that ecosystem in your pot. but then once your plant starts actively rotting, it's now food time. So things can start to overpopulate in your soil. So you don't want to use that soil again, because you don't know, it could have been a bacteria or a fungus that's in there, that's helping with that rot. They're just doing their jobs, but yeah, so you might have to get rid of that mix. But unless some people bake their mixes, you can do that if you don't want to waste substrate. You can put your mix in the oven. I think you go to like 180 or something like that. I would have to look that up, but yeah, you can bake your substrate if you wanted to kind of disinfect it. But yeah, you can. So just cutting that off, kind of cleaning it really well. Just make sure there's not a dot of dirt or anything on that. And then put it into water again. But just where the roots start to flare out. So try to avoid putting it into water where all the base of the leaves are submerged. Try to kind of go lower than that. So it's just the roots that are coming in contact with water, and not the actual like plant itself. Yeah, that can happen. Roz, for ivy and spider plants in water, how often would the water be changed? It really depends. So also on location. So I have quite a few water propagations all throughout my house. The ones that are away from the window, I don't have to worry about algae. And usually they'll dry out, so I just top them off. For the ones I have by the window, algae is an ever-present problem, because if it starts to turn green, they actually are stealing oxygen away from your plant's roots. So you would have to do so more often, make sure it's nice and clean, you don't have any algae in there. If the water starts to look murky, definitely do so. Sometimes I go like 2 to 3 weeks before actually changing a plant's water if it looks perfectly fine. It's more so I'm kind of more on high alert if I see something weird. So if I see algae, if I see it kind of getting murky or cloudy or looking kind of brown or anything like that, then I immediately change it. But yeah, usually sometimes go weeks without changing it, and I'm just topping it off as water evaporates or is used. I just kind of bring it back up to the level it should be. But yeah, so I would say just keep an eye. If you see anything weird, definitely change it. But otherwise, sometimes, yeah, every 2 to 3 weeks tend to be okay. And you give it a good rinse. Make sure get one of those like the bottle cleaners. I get those, like the baby bottle cleaners, for because they fit perfectly with my jars and tubes. But yeah. Tanya, a parlor palm has had some crispy lower leaves, lack of moisture. Can I rehydrate them or should I cut them off? You cannot rehydrate them. If they are crispy, that's it, they're dead. So yeah, you can definitely cut them off. But yeah, with synth, what soil for a panda plant? Yes, I would say a nice mix of like a succulent soil, perlite, a little bit of orchid bark, and maybe some, yeah, like leca or lava rock. So a lot of like kind of little stones with some succulent soil and some like bark. So like the orchid bark, or if you find like cocoa chips as well are good. So a well draining mix, they will appreciate that. But yeah, they were great. Darlene, I noticed last week as you were walking around your apartment showing us your plants, you had a humidifier. Do you use a warm mist or a cool mist? Oh, that one, I think that was my Honeywell. I'm trying to remember if it's a cold or, I think it's like the ultrasonic. I can check. But it has 2 spouts. So I like to move it on top and it'll shoot in different directions. And I basically keep that running. I actually have to turn it on now because our humidity dropped drastically. Right now it is 42 degrees Fahrenheit here. But this is probably the lowest I've seen the humidity go. So it looks like it's right now, it dropped to right now by my windowsill, it's 23. I'm seeing like 35. So yeah, I gotta turn them on. I gotta get the humidity up quick. But yeah, I think that one might be a cool mist. So I think that one's a cool mist. But I can check. I'll check. It's the Honeywell. I think we got it at Target. I'm trying to see if I can. No, it just says Honeywell. But I will find out and yeah, and let you know if it does have a different setting. But I think it's cool mist. And it's fine in terms of having them running because it gets really hot in here because of the heater. And we have a fan, so we have fans that circulate the air. So it's not getting cold per se, so the plants aren't getting cold. But yeah, so I'll find out. It's the Honeywell. Yeah. Darlene says, I bought one that had both, but it was a bottom fill and too heavy for me to lift the full tank and put onto the base, so I'm returning it. Yeah, definitely get one that is, we had one like that, that it was a bottom fill and it was really heavy and we kept tipping, it kept like spilling over. It was just a nightmare. So definitely get one that's just the most convenient for you. They come in so many different sizes. The Honeywell, would you be able to see what type it is? Does it say on the back? Sorry, Brian just passed by, and so I was seeing if he. I think it's the Cool Mist, right? Oh, watch out. I'm talking about water spilling. It spilled. It does model HUL 545W. HUL 545W. Yeah, that's the one that I have. But yeah, try to get one that's convenient to you and that's not going to be too heavy for you to move around. You want to make it easy on yourself. We also we have our apartment. It's pretty small, so we like to even put boiling water on the stove, and it raises the humidity super quick in our kitchen, and it goes into our living room, raises that humidity up real quick. So it works. But all right, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for joining me. If you would like, I'll put in the Facebook group the title of the book, if anyone's on there, just in case, that I was mentioning earlier. I mentioned the rulership book. If you are into kind of more esoteric and you want to learn kind of what oh, hold on, what is going on here? Somebody just popped this open. I have no idea what just popped open. Something just popped open. But yes, and so you can definitely check out that book. Also Trees of New York and the Global Flora book that comes with that poster. So check that out. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Enjoy the rest of your week. Please stay safe out there. And thanks so much. Thanks so much for tuning in, and be safe. Seriously, be safe, and happy planting, everyone. Bye for now. Thank you so much, everyone.